Brands need to be able to communicate very clearly who they are and what they do. Brand communication plays a crucial role when it comes to building powerful connection with an audience. Having an effective brand communication strategy is a key element of any branding effort. Today, we're going to be exploring the importance of brand communications with a great brander. Welcome to Talking with Branders. This is episode number 4 of Talking with Branders with Brand Communication Director Casey Seijas. We would like to welcome everyone to brandersmagazine.com, new podcast Talking with Branders, a new way to learn about branding from the best branders of the globe. I'm here today with Brand Communication Director at Segal & Gill, Casey Seijas. Casey, thank you so much for joining us today and accepting our invitation.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be here.
Well, we're very happy to have you indeed. So before we get started, I'd like to give a brief introduction about Casey to our Branders readers. Casey has a deep background in branding, integrated media, and journalism. He has empowered brands to realize their true identities and give them the tools to express the truth through engaging and memorable campaigns. Over the past years, he has worked with companies such as Novartis, CVS Health, Ericsson, Motorola, Honeywell, General Mills, DC Comics, among others. His journalistic writing has appeared in outlets including NTV News, ESPN, Voice Media, and AOL. So that's why I'm very excited to have Casey here today to talk about brand communications. So let's start with the first question. So, Casey, what is brand communication and how can brands craft a messaging or a communication strategy that customers love?
Right. So thank you again for having me. So I'll just get right into it. In its most basic terms, a brand communication strategy essentially defines your brand's personality, how you sound, what you believe in, and then how and where you speak your truth to your audience. Seems simple enough, yeah, but it's a tricky process. You talk with any brand side manager or CMO at the start of a brand comm strategy process, and 9 times out of 10, they'll say, we want to be everything to everybody. We want to save the world. We want to revolutionize our entire industry. We also want to be authentic and innovative and leaders and on and on. So, I love the aspiration and we can get there, but it's way easier said than done. And a big part of that is commitment and frankly, a bit of bravery. So, as far as crafting a comm strategy, there's really no one-size-fits-all formula. So, what works for, say, a Lululemon won't work for a General Motors. But crafting one people will love, or at least like a lot, is my goal no matter what the brand or industry. So I think at the core of a successful brand comm strategy, what people really gravitate towards, especially now, and this was the point of my article, is humanity, this sort of realness. Often in the past in my role, when we would start the process of developing voice attributes, in other words, the how you sound part of the equation I alluded to earlier, we would oftentimes add human as its own attribute. Moving forward, I think that needs to be table stakes, almost like a given. There needs to be that human, we're on the same level no matter who you are type of communication between brand, customer, and especially the employee and business partners. So you can have that same level of game-changing aspiration. I mean, that's the goal, but not at the extent of being seen as disconnected from the folks who got you there, who again, your customers and employees. So yeah, it's really hard to find a template or a recipe, say, but I think a big part of what is tapping into, a big part of it is tapping into what we call your ness. That, in other words, the unique thing that only you can do, or who you can claim to be honestly and with confidence. I think that's the foundation of a good brand comms or messaging strategy.
And great explanation. Yeah, couldn't have said it better. So Casey, speaking about your article in Branders Magazine, the title of your article was A New Human Normal, Why Brands Should Take a Con-Mary Approach to Their Storytelling. And in this specific article, you highlighted that each brand has the ability to tell a good story even during difficult times. So what's the best way for brands to communicate during a global crisis?
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words and also for the very challenging questions. So I'll be honest with you, I don't have a definitive answer. I mean, especially now, just because, with the fact that, events and crises, they keep evolving. And honestly, I don't think anyone really has an answer at this point, just because things are moving so quickly. But I'll give it my best shot. So that being said, I think these past 6 months have shown that brands have to adopt a proactive approach to communications during global crisis at a foundational level. You'll likely hear me say this a lot in our conversation, but brands have way more power than they often realize. And part of that is influence over an audience, but it's a two-way street, yeah? What I mean is brands can say a lot, but they should also be listening nonstop to their customers and partners and employees. Crisis comms from a PR perspective are expensive, and brands never really want to use those. But in the case of something like a global pandemic, a natural disaster, societal unrest, they should know well in advance what their audiences both want and need to hear. So that means staying on voice, staying on message, and again, having that level of humanity. And by that, I mean having clear, sincere answers to questions and concerns. So if you're in finance, your customers need to know first and foremost that their assets are secure. If you're a tech provider, your customers need to know that their online and remote workforces will still be able to operate like we're doing now. That's priority number one. However, in a close second, both your customers and your employees should know your values and missions by heart. Maybe not that extreme, but what I mean is look, no one who either works for or buys Ben and Jerry's ice cream was surprised about the profound and frankly courageous statement they made recently on social media regarding the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm sure there were a few Twitter reply guys who swore off Half-Baked or Cherry Garcia ice cream for life. But to their core audience and employees, that's exactly what they expected to hear. And in the process, they probably added 10 additional customers to the one that claimed to have left. So take a stand and remember who got you there. And last, and I can't stress this enough, communicate earnestly, but keep it short. Look, the dirty secret is people don't like to read. They won't sit and watch a video longer than a TikTok. You're fighting for attention constantly, especially when it comes to brand communications. So in times of crisis, keep it humble and meaningful, and that means really keeping it brief. So if I had to answer your question as best as I could, I'd say 1, be prepared for anything. 2, know your audience and know what they both need and are expecting to hear from you. And 3, again, be human, sincere, and concise.
Wow, these are great points and excellent advice. And I wish every single marketeer or brand communication would hear this, because there's so many misconceptions, and yeah, there's no right or wrong, but more importantly, it's like knowing your audience and getting that trust and being authentic. So thank you so much for sharing those. Like, I'm definitely taking note. Excellent class. So what are the most common mistakes, speaking about what's right or wrong at the moment, what are the most common mistakes that companies make in terms of brand communication? And I guess you already answered like my next question, which was like the best advice in terms of messaging. So like, if you can just share with us like 1 or 2 common mistakes that you usually see, like besides messages being too long or inappropriate.
Okay, yeah. I mean, how long have you got, honestly? I could take up a lot of time with this one, but in terms of biggest mistakes, I think one of the biggest unforced errors I see brands make is really second guessing themselves, or worse, second guessing or underestimating their audiences. At Siegel and Gale, before we start any brand communication strategy, we do a ton of research. We have a whole team dedicated to research and analysis. We try and interview as many brand side stakeholders as possible. This is never truly a piece of organic creative. There's always a lot of science that happens before the art. So we try to get a clear understanding of why, as an agency, we were hired in the first place, and learn as much about the challenges, opportunities, audience, competitors, etc., before we put pen to paper. Like I mentioned earlier at the start, there's typically a lot of enthusiasm from brands, but the truth is there's a lot of decision makers involved in the process of creating a brand communication strategy. And oftentimes that old adage of too many cooks in the kitchen really holds true. So usually it'll be something simple like wordsmithing or changing a phrase to be a little less bombastic, which is no big deal. I mean, listen, personally, I'm sick to death of the word innovative. We all have our grudges, but the problem comes when they try to be everything to everyone, and that tends to be impossible. So let's just, for instance, say you're a tech company. And the research shows that your key audience is made up primarily of CTOs and IT decision makers, typically smart folks, yeah? So what happens is we'll begin messaging work, writing to that specific audience who are used to be spoken to at a high level. But then outside decision makers within the brand will start to worry that's neglecting a broader audience. And I'm talking about a general audience here. Likely the folks that won't come close to interacting with your messaging. So we'll start getting feedback saying, oh, this is reading at too high a level, dumb it down for something that the average Joe will understand. And by doing that, you're going to lose any credibility you had with that core constituency that you were trying to communicate with in the first place. You come across as unauthentic or worse, patronizing. And additionally, if I'm sticking to my theme here, there are ways to be human and also speak to people at their level. So let's just stick with the tech company here as an example. A few years back, I was working with a major global tech client on messaging, and we were developing voice attributes, again, that how you sound that I mentioned earlier for them. And I proposed one of the attributes to be nerdy. Not in a negative sense, but more in a sense of, act like you know these folks. These people know the lingo. They know what IoT is. They understand what 5G entails. We don't need to add definitions for these things like we're going to be speaking to my mom every time we produce a piece of content. Our direct clients loved it, but as it made its way through the stakeholder approvals, folks started to sour on the idea. Again, looking at it through a broad scope instead of the core audiences we'd be speaking to. Regardless, long story short, we wound up resolving things, but just an example of knowing and respecting who your audience is. So the key things that I would say are, challenges, but that can be resolved is just, trust the research, trust the strategy, and give your audience the credit they deserve. So that was a long-winded answer to that first part of the question. I think the other thing you wanted to ask are, what are some of the brands that are kind of doing a good job right now?
Yes. Example could be clients of yours, people you have worked with before, or it could be like any other brands that you absolutely love and you really admire their brand messaging strategy.
Okay. So, not kind of the ones I've worked on. I feel like my answer to this would have been completely different had you asked me even a month ago, but just because we're obviously in the midst of turmoil and brands are in a confusing and uncharted position, bear with me for a second. I'm going to make a point in kind of a roundabout way. So, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, and the source of this was my wife, Valerie, giving her credit where credit's due, is, asking the question, what can I do to help? Is one of the worst things you can do in situations like this. And the reason being is because you're likely adding more burden and putting the responsibility on the folks who you're trying to help in the first place. So, no one should have to tell you in these positions of influence that brands are in to donate or speak out against wrongs or just listen. Remember, brands have power and privilege now more than ever. They have massive, diverse audiences. And the good brands know their customers and partners well. So just to answer your question, there's two off the top of my head who I think are really doing a great job right now. And that one is Sweet Green, which for those who are unfamiliar is a QSR salad restaurant. And two is Skillshare, which is an online learning platform. I point them out because during the pandemic and now with the current social unrest here in the US, they were the first ones out of the gate that I saw personally to put their foot down and say, what's going on is a turning point. We're not going back to normal. We're taking a stand, and here's exactly what we're doing. So, for two smaller, let's just say upstart or up-and-coming brands, that takes a massive applause-worthy amount of courage, saying essentially, if you disagree with us, not only are you wrong, but please move off to the side so we can get to work with our customers and partners who are with us. History is moving fast, especially now. And to paraphrase another quote by Alan Moore, those who aren't riding with history are likely under its wheels. So essentially, the longer brands wait to respond or react or have their legal or PR or shareholders wordsmith their response, the more their messages will come across as watered down or generic. There was a great video going around on YouTube at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, and you may have seen it, but it was a supercut of commercials from several major brands pointing out how they were all saying the same thing. Like literally it was the same commercial, same visual, same style, all saying the same words, to the point that a word like unprecedented became unusable overnight just because it reached that point of saturation. And as a brand, I feel like the worst thing you can do is seem generic or simply reacting because you see everyone else is doing it. brands are made by people like you and me, people who care, and they want their voices to be heard, and also know that their employer is on their side. Same with customers. There's a reason why people point to Patagonia and like Nike and Lyft and, again, Ben and Jerry's as examples of brands that fearlessly take a stand through their communication. And, that's because they believe in and they're honest with themselves. They're honest with their employees, their partners, and their customers. So again, I think this all ties back to just being human and being authentic and, being true to yourself, even if you know it'll upset some folks along the way, and speaking to your people on common ground. So, to me, the best brands not only do that during the hard times like now, but they do it always.
Yeah, and the customers knows that, especially when you're dealing with a more educated audience than before. Like people know what they want and what they love, and they will be demanding that, like no matter like whichever time we're living or we're going through. Casey, this was an excellent class. Thank you so much for sharing so many interesting insights. And like I said before, I wish every single marketeer will hear this conversation. Any final remarks that you would like to add? And can you please share with us your social media, company website? How can we reach to you?
Yeah, no, I mean, this was a lot of fun. And again, I think just really finding that core, again, that nest is really what brands should be doing. That really just defines themselves. Social media, I'm on LinkedIn just like everyone else, where I'm trying to be a little more active. So you can find me there, first name, last name. I'm pretty sure I'm probably the only Casey Seijas on the planet. I would also recommend you visit siegelgale.com to explore some of our work and thought leadership, and also Siegel and Gale's Twitter handle, which is @SiegelGale, no and LinkedIn and Facebook.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you.
And to our audience, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this interview. We hope you enjoyed it. Please share this insight to just learn about the importance of brand communications with your colleagues and friends. And head over to brandersmagazine.com for more stories with branders. Our latest issue, number 17, is out now. Make sure you sign up to receive all the magazines and exclusive marketing content from top industry professionals like Casey. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next interview, and join our LinkedIn group. Thank you, and see you next time.